All right, guys, so it really looks like Donald Trump is gearing up to either assassinate or overthrow the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, or to maybe get us into a full blown war with the country. So I want to show you guys this recent clip from obviously Trump ally Steve Bannon, as well as Kurt Mills, describing why this is utterly and completely insane and deranged. And then I'll show you guys some of the latest movements from the Trump administration, because at this point, they have basically dropped even the pretense of having diplomatic talks or relations with Venezuela, and they're gearing up for a mobilization for a potential invasion of the country. So let's go ahead and watch this clip, and then I'll break everything else down for y'all.
And on top of that, little Marco, our Secretary of State, who's we try to shift away from being a neocon. I thought we were there. He's got an amphibious ready group off the coast of Venezuela, and they're up on Capitol Hill pitching. And this is the first time that the Trump administration, I think, has ever acknowledged issues, structural issues, or customs and traditions. So they're trying to get ahead of the War Powers Act by saying, no, 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 you've misinterpreted. These are non-state actors. These are drug dealers, and we're going to do a lot more than just taking out these speedboats. The plan has, I think, been leaked that they intend to, or at least a plan is to intend to take over the ports and transportation nodes in an actual invasion. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, the secretary doesn't appear to be able to give up the old religion. As you are well aware, in the first term, the now Secretary of State was the key interlocutor with the administration, selling the new President Trump back in 17, 18, 19 on some of the most harebrained schemes for Latin America. Members of Trump's first team, namely Mr. Bolton and Mr. Pompeo, were very zealous on this. There was a bit of an abortive effort to do that. Everyone remembers the Juan Guaido episode. And so there was a lot of hope that this was kind of behind us. There are elements, even members of President Trump's club, this Harry Sargent character, as well as Rick Grinnell, who wanted to be Secretary of State by most reporting, who wanted to do a deal, basically, with Maduro. Maduro is a sort of, tin pot dictator in South America, but not necessarily a major threat to U.S. national security. And I think the risks of going in versus keeping our powder dry are pretty clear. Latin America has a lot of problems. South America has a lot of problems. But what it doesn't have historically, and Venezuela is the one exception vis-a-vis Colombia, what it doesn't have is these massive refugee crises that we saw in the Syrian case, in the Libyan case. And so I think the way to think about Maduro is as maybe a Latino Gaddafi. And what do we learn from the Gaddafi case? What do we learn by not listening to Gaddafi himself? If you break it, you buy it.
So that's an important point that he's making there at the end, making a comparison between Muammar Gaddafi, that the U.S. helped to overthrow and to kill in 2011, and Maduro, because look at what happened in Libya, right? You had a completely failed state in the aftermath of that, and it had not only consequences, obviously, for the people of Libya, first and foremost, but also for the region, and also tangentially for Europe as well, that then had to deal with a mass migration and a refugee crisis as a result of that. Now, what do you think would happen if we did the same to Venezuela? And by the way, this is not even a hypothetical comparison here, because this is a comparison that Marco Rubio, Trump's current head of state or Secretary of State, has made himself. I mean, this is back from 2019. U.S. announces new Venezuela sanctions as Rubio shares snuff movie pictures of Colonel Gaddafi in a threat to Maduro. So again, this is not a hypothetical comparison. And you want to talk about, as Trump does, the U.S. dealing with an immigration crisis. What do you think is going to happen if you destabilize the country of Venezuela? It would be absolutely catastrophic. Again, not just for the people of Venezuela, but the people of the region in South America, in Central America, and also, yes, the United States. So completely and utterly deranged plan. And again, this isn't the first time that the Trump administration has tried this, because back in 2019, I believe, they also tried that sort of pathetic, failed Juan Guaido-led coup attempt in Venezuela that catastrophically failed and fell apart. But this is what they tried in the last administration. So it really shouldn't be surprising that we're seeing this again, for all those people out there who thought Trump was going to be this, anti-war America first kind of guy. He tried this once in his first term, and this is just him sort of repeating the effort almost on a much larger scale, because it seems like you're not doing it in as hands-off a way as was the case with Juan Guaido, but literally bringing U.S. military assets this time up to the coast of Venezuela. And I'll show you more of that here in a minute. So the latest on this mobilization for war, I got two New York Times articles breaking all of this down. The first one here, the headline is Trump determined that the U.S. is now in a war with drug cartels, according to this note that he sent to Congress. So a little bit on this. They say President Trump has decided that the U.S. is engaged in a formal armed conflict with drug cartels his team has labeled as terrorist organizations, and that suspected smugglers for such groups are, quote, unlawful combatants, the administration said in a confidential notice to Congress this week. So, a couple important points on this. Number one, drug traffickers are not terrorists, right? You don't have to like drug traffickers or drug cartels, obviously, to understand that there's a categorical difference between a terrorist organization, one that is trying to inflict terror on a population for some sort of political gain, versus an organization that is essentially functioning as an illicit or illegal business. They're not trying to terrorize the American people. They're trying to make money off the American people. So to frame them as a terrorist organization is, number one, ridiculous at face value, but number two, understand what the purpose of this is. The purpose of labeling them as terrorist organizations is to give the Trump administration permission, both abroad as well as potentially even domestically here in the United States, permission to use lethal force so that they don't have to give anybody due process. They don't have to make arrests. They can just blow you up in international waters or potentially kill you even here in the United States if the Trump administration deems you to be part of a terrorist organization or part of drug trafficking to the United States or in the United States. So that's the reason why they're changing this language to say, no, you're not a drug trafficker. You're actually an unlawful combatant, as if people who are trafficking drugs are equivalent to soldiers that are in an active war with the United States of America. That's what they're trying to say here. Now they continue. They say the notice was sent to several congressional committees and obtained by the New York Times. It adds a new detail to the Trump administration's thinly articulated legal rationale for why 3 U.S. military strikes the president ordered on boats in the Caribbean Sea last month, killing 17 people on board them, should be seen as lawful rather than murder. And by the way, in at least one of these cases of one of the guys who was killed on these small, seemingly fishing vessels that the Trump administration provides no evidence are actually doing drug trafficking, but one of the widows of the people who was killed said that her husband was just a fisherman, right? So again, they're trying to say these are active combatants so that they can justify this being a lawful act instead of just murking people out in the open seas, which is exactly what they're doing. Now they continue. They say Mr. Trump's move to formally deem his campaign against drug cartels as an active armed conflict means that he is cementing his claim to extraordinary wartime powers, which is what this primarily is. This isn't really about drug trafficking to the United States. It's mostly about a power grab and trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government. They say in an armed conflict, as defined by international law, a country can lawfully kill enemy fighters even when they pose no threat, detain them indefinitely without trials, and prosecute them in military courts. That's the kind of power grab that Trump is going for here, right? Killing, detaining them indefinitely with no trials or due process, and prosecuting them in military courts. And again, if you think this is going to be contained to, overseas, then I don't know, check again the recent actions from the Trump administration domestically here with his so-called law enforcement. Now, they say that Jeffrey S. Korn, a retired judge advocate, general lawyer, who was formerly the Army's senior advisor for law of war issues, said that drug cartels were not engaged in hostilities, the standard for when there is an armed conflict for legal purposes against the United States, because selling a dangerous product is different than an armed attack. No shit. You wouldn't think that's difficult to figure out. He says, noting that it is illegal for the military to deliberately target civilians who are not participating directly in hostilities, even if they are suspected criminals, Mr. Korn called the president's move an abuse that crossed a major legal line, saying this is not stretching the envelope, this is shredding it, this is tearing it apart. And finally, they say the Trump administration had called those strikes self-defense, asserting that the targets were smuggling drugs for cartels that the administration had designated as terrorists and invoking the laws of war to justify killing them rather than arresting them. The administration has also stressed that about 100,000 Americans annually die from overdoses. So this is where you get to the point where it's just comically absurd in terms of their justifications for use of force against Venezuela. Because let's just ask some basic questions here, because we know the stats on this. We know the facts and the basic figures on this. He says 100,000 Americans die annually from overdoses. Okay, let's accept that at face value. What are Americans primarily overdosing on right now? It's fentanyl, right? Where is fentanyl being trafficked from? It's primarily being trafficked over the border from Mexico, right? That's where it's actually being trafficked from. Some of the precursor chemicals come from places like China and India, etc., but then they're brought over and refined in labs in Mexico. You know how much fentanyl comes into the United States from Venezuela? It's about 0%. Nothing. Nada. So to bring up this kind of a figure as a rationale for ramping up tensions with Venezuela, it's just absurd at face value. Not to mention that when you look at the actual ships that they're bombing here, I mean, this was one that was posted recently by Pete Hegseth. I mean, look at the size of this vessel here. I don't even think you could call it a vessel. It's like a small, fishing ship, I guess it would be more accurately called. And they're just blowing it out of the water. Like, they want you to believe that this tiny little, what seems to be fishing vessel here is packed full of, I guess, a couple bags worth of cocaine or whatever, and that they're coming all the way from Venezuela, either, I guess, by Puerto Rico or Haiti and Cuba, and then past the Bahamas and up to Florida, and that this is the method that these drug trafficking organizations or drug cartels are using to mass import drugs into the United States. It's just ridiculous at face value. And again, of course, they provide no evidence that these are quote unquote narco trafficking vessels. They just claim that they are and assume that that's enough. Now, a little bit more on the the ending of diplomatic talks with Venezuela. Again, here from the New York Times, they say that President Trump has called off efforts to reach a diplomatic agreement with Venezuela, according to U.S. officials, paving the way for a potential military escalation against drug traffickers or the government of Nicolas Maduro. They say Mr. Trump has grown frustrated with Mr. Maduro's, and I want to restart this sentence just so you get a sense of how utterly insane what we're about to read actually is. Okay, are you ready for this? Mr. Trump has grown frustrated with Mr. Maduro's failure to accede to American demands to give up power voluntarily, and the continued insistence by Venezuelan officials that they have no part in drug trafficking. They're actually saying that we're cutting off diplomatic relations with Venezuela because we told Maduro to step down from power, and he didn't do it because we told him to. I'm sorry, what? What the fuck are we talking about here? The United States of America just gets to order various countries' leaders, again, like them or not, we just get to order various countries' leaders to step down from power. And if you don't, then we're going to invade you, we're going to assassinate you, we're going to overthrow your government or destabilize your country or continue with sanctioning your country. What are we fucking talking about here? What an insane sentence. He's grown frustrated with Maduro's failure to accede to American demands to give up power voluntarily. What are we doing here, guys? More, though, they say American officials have said that the Trump administration has drawn up multiple military plans for an escalation. Those operations could include plans designed to force Mr. Maduro from power. And they say Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, who apparently is like the most influential guy in the Trump administration right now, has called Mr. Maduro an illegitimate leader and repeatedly cited a U.S. indictment of him on drug trafficking charges. And he also floated a $50 million bounty. $50 million bounty, which is kind of amazing, just the logic that's going on here of we're going to bring an indictment against you arbitrarily. We're going to levy a $50 million bounty on your head and then use the bounty that we just put on you as justification or some sort of validation for us going to war with you. I mean, what a ridiculous sort of circular logic that he's using there. But I mean, again, you have Marco Rubio, who has wanted to topple the Venezuelan government for years and years and years. They tried and he pushed for this back in 2019. It failed. And now he's trying again. And apparently he's extremely influential over Donald Trump right now, who's just sort of going along with this fully willingly. Right? Like, it's not like you can blame Marco Rubio because Trump is clearly fully on board with all of this. But it seems like this is the direction that we're going. Now, a little bit more here. They say Mr. Rubio and his allies in the Trump administration have been pushing a strategy to drive Maduro from power. American officials say that Maduro directs drug cartels operating in Venezuela, a charge that the Venezuelan government denies. And they also say, as Steve Bannon and Kurt Mills were saying in this clip, that Mr. Grinnell in the Trump administration has been negotiating with Maduro for months, though those talks intensified in recent weeks as the U.S. military began striking the boats. And last month, Mr. Maduro wrote a letter to Trump denying his country trafficked in drugs and offering to conduct further negotiations with the United States via Grinnell. And Grinnell has tried to fashion a deal that would avoid a larger conflict and give American companies access to Venezuelan oil. And that's much closer, I guess, to the direction that we should be going in terms of relations with Venezuela. We should be ending sanctions on Venezuela. We should be cutting deals with them if that's the direction that we want to go. And we could have a positive relationship with the government of Venezuela. So, I mean, I don't even know what this is about outside of potentially, I guess, Marco Rubio's like firm anti-socialist stance, or potentially wanting to get full access to Venezuela's oils via American companies, or it's genuinely hard to even pin down exactly what this is even about, because it's certainly not about what they're claiming at the surface level, that this is about stopping drug trafficking to the United States, because again, statistically, that makes no sense. If you were going to go after any country for that, you'd go after Mexico. Clearly, the United States doesn't want to do that, nor should we do that, because they're our largest trading partner, and that obviously wouldn't be positive for anybody involved. But it's clearly not about the drug trafficking aspect of it. So what is it about? Is it about the oil? Is it about Marco Rubio and his sort of like, anti-communist crusade or something like that? Is this about, again, getting access to the oil, or what else could it possibly be? A personal beef because your last coup failed and you want to get in one more time and try it again this time around? But there you have that aspect of it. At least there's, I guess, some pressure in the Trump administration from people who want to continue to have some sort of a relationship with Venezuela instead of invading. But now we also have this here from Trump as he was giving a speech to Navy personnel. And he says, they're not coming by land or by sea anymore. So now we'll have to start looking about the land because they'll be forced to go by land. So this was him, again, talking to the U.S. Navy as he struck another vessel off the coast of Venezuela, praising attacks on cartel terrorists and hinting at ground operations to come. They say here from Dropsite News that the Pentagon admits that at least 4 such strikes in recent weeks have killed more than 20 people, and no cartel ties have been verified, and the U.S. has provided no evidence. And legal experts warn that the killings are a clear breach of due process. And we also have, as he's talking about a potential ground invasion of Venezuela, I guess, more and more U.S. military assets in the region. So as of a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. had at least 8 warships and 1 submarine in the Eastern Caribbean that you can see here positioned pretty closely off the coast of Venezuela, sort of encircling it around here. And then we also have Venezuela saying that it detected 5 U.S. combat planes flying only 75 kilometers from its coast, calling it a provocation. And I think that's a pretty fair bet when you have the president and the Secretary of State sort of openly flouting the possibility of overthrowing your government. Don't think that's much of a stretch to say that's a provocation. So there you have it, guys. I mean, we have, previous comparisons to Libya and the overthrow of Gaddafi made by Marco Rubio, who is now the Secretary of State. We have Donald Trump cutting off diplomatic communications with Venezuela as they continue to send more and more military assets to the region. You have continued strikes on what seems to be shipping or fishing vessels off the coast of Venezuela. And you have Trump basically saying we are now in a full-blown war with drug cartels, or whoever he identifies as drug cartels, and that for some reason needs to result in the overthrow of the Venezuelan government. So this is utterly insane, guys. I mean, honestly, I thought the biggest threat for the U.S. getting ourselves into another war was going to be Iran, which is certainly on the table. Israel is definitely still pushing for that aggressively, but it looks like Venezuela may be, potentially in the immediate future, a country that we are directly at war with or trying to make attempts on the assassination of their political leader. I mean, absolutely insane.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying